Well, good afternoon. My name is Josh Hanlon. I live in Denton, and primarily I work as a performer. I play in Stockton Helbing's trio. Maybe some of you saw the concert this afternoon. Anyway, I do work a lot with high school students on realizing big bands and working on the etudes every year, particularly David Lowndes students at Southwood Carroll. So I'm going through the piano etudes today. Just FYI, we seem to be running about a half an hour behind, so you can expect a trombone. I'm sure that's not unusual. Anyway, I had a nice presentation all worked up. We don't have the cable that they told me they'd have, so I'll put that up later. If you email me, I'll be happy to send you the presentation, and my information is on these cards up here. I'll leave some of them when I'm done today. Deal?
Yeah.
All right, so here's etude 1. This is the bop etude. See how nimble, here we go. So, obviously for pianists, the lack of information is the left hand, which we'll talk about in a bit. We'll do the standard things, but I'll try to give you some ideas to help you through that. But let's hear the etude itself. It says 180 plus, let's just stick around 180. Thanks. Everybody pick up on the tune? It's there at the end. It's I'll Be Seeing You. It's a semi-faint tune. I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. Right, so obviously playing I'll Be Seeing You for the student, especially if you can find a nice medium or upswing tune version of that, right? My philosophy is one tune 100 times, not 100 tunes one time. We're living in the Spotify world, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Dizzy Gillespie had one record. He learned all the trumpet parts. He learned all the piano parts on that record. You know, there are countless examples of that in biography. So we stress that. You know, so if you were listening if you want to find some great pianists that you might want to listen to for examples of this type of feel. Obviously, Bud Powell was the progenitor of this bebop style. Wynton Kelly, excellent example. Red Garland, excellent example. Hampton Hawes, Bill Evans. All great articulators of these sort of jazz piano styles. I would suggest not even trying to go that far. Find one solo the student digs, one track, get them into it. It's probably not going to have the same changes. It's not going to be this solo, but get it in their ears. Ears first, hands later. Right? Alright, now I have to switch back and forth a little bit. You can see this on the screen, but okay. I hear year after year when I hear my students working on their etudes, and then by the time crunch hit and they play them, either for the band auditions or later for all region, because they tend to end up being both, right, sometimes. The ends of the etudes just aren't happening. Get them to work on what I call the XYZ method. Get them to play the last 4 bars. Get them to play the middle 4 bars. Get them to play the second set of 4 bars, you know, and put it together. So they're not always at the top, starting at the top, starting at best 4 bars you've ever heard. Great. Well, you listen to the tape and it falls apart. And you can usually predict when it's going to fall apart. One of the reasons you're going to be able to predict when it's going to fall apart is because the rhythmic values are going to be tricky in a certain spot. Have a pianist work on clapping out the rhythms, speaking the rhythms. If you can get them to use the nonsense syllables, you don't have to teach them fa or dwee ba or zway da, but if you can get them, there's a reason those articulations come off the tongue. I mean, that they work. So if you can get a pianist in that sense to emulate the vocal and the horn, the rhythms are going to work out better. And the fact is that even though you should work slow, of course you should work slow and work up the tempo, if you can get your students to functionally process the rhythms at close to the tempo they're going to play them, they're going to have a greater sense of unity, because as tempo increases, unity increases. So the sense of it being a phrase becomes stronger when you have them work at slightly faster tempos. So balance those two things. That helps to push it towards and gives them a goal to drive towards that goal tempo, which, to be honest, for these etudes, when they're auditioning, I've had several students do extremely well in all region, not playing up to tempo, but playing great musical versions. I'm sure many of you have had the same experience. So even though there is a metronomic end tempo, you know, don't push the tempo on the ballad too much, but get them to where they're making musical language. But just remember that driving that tempo towards the faster, towards the goal tempo can give you that sense of it all coming together. And if you remove those musical elements, it can really help you. Okay? Another thing I do with students that just keep working on the parts they know is I will literally take, we have about 3 million post-it notes in my house. I will take post-it notes out and put them over the parts they know, leaving them the parts they do not. And they'll work on them. And then they could put it together. Just some thoughts. It's really important for the pianists to get beyond the point of reading these things. Some pianists are really good readers. In fact, you're going to have some spectacular versions of Etude 2 every year. Why? Because they don't necessarily need to make chord realizations happen, right? And so you have wonderful classical pianists that just can't realize chords yet that are going to do great versions of that. But if you don't internalize these lines, you're not going to have the mental energy in order to get out the information of figuring out the thirds and sevenths. We had an earlier clinician talking about how getting the thirds and sevenths and the theory together is difficult for younger students. Well, pianists, it's not a negotiation. They have to be able to realize that. If they're just memorizing it off a piece of paper, I don't get why we're doing it in the first place, right? Rote learning is good, but we have to be teaching them about the sounds of the third. The sound of the third and seventh is critical to understanding how this all works in our ears. So, giving them that theory. I mean, kids are coding at age 4 now. This is not that complicated. Okay, some thoughts about the left-hand realization on this etude. One of the things that will cross up teachers trying to help students with the left-hand voicings is the fact that you have all these sharp 5s and flat 9s, and that becomes difficult, especially if you're a non-pianist working with your students. Step 1, 3, step 2, 7. Great. Thirds and sevenths. Find them, know them. Get them to flip them over if they're closer, right? Stay between middle C and the octave below middle C in terms of the low note of the voicing of the thirds and sevenths. In general, omit the roots at the bottom of the chord. There are plenty of places where it's actually appropriate, but getting into that nuance is difficult at this level, of course. All right? If you want to do it at cadence points, at important points, at 4-bar points. Right? Like I have an example right here, which if you email me, I'll be happy to send you, of just the first 12 or 16 bars realized with the left hand. And I use it just on the first bar because that's an obvious point. Right? But stay out of the bass player, even if it's a recorder or an imaginary, stay out of their way and don't play roots all the time. If there's an extended note, just take a look and see if it's in the line itself, right? So a G7 with a sharp 5, if there's an E flat in the line, you don't have to realize it in your left hand. It isn't accounting, right? As long as it's there in the overall picture, then you're fine. If you just play thirds and sevenths, you're likely fine anyway, but there are a couple of small examples in the etudes where it would be appropriate to add the other notes into the chord. Half diminished chords in particular, you should add the flat 5 in the left hand. When you choose to play comping rhythms, of course this is another thing that's difficult. Try to imagine how a snare drum is used to guide a big band, or how a drummer plays fills. Does a drummer play everything does it play the same rhythm that the rest of the band is playing in order to guide them to play that rhythm? No, it's the opposite, right? Play where they ain't, right? So find ways that you feel like the left hand is guiding the written out right hand by playing in the cracks or supporting. Now let me just play the version that I realized here to give you an idea. I'll do it a little slower so you can hear it. Obviously, where there are significant accent points, you can join forces, right? Left hand and the right hand can come together. Now, that C minor section is where the seventh is descending, like My Funny Valentine. We call it cash in jazz analysis. Is a great spot for that reinforcement of the right hand because of the way that it's accented. So playing on the downbeats of those da ba da ba da ba da makes sense. If you have an advanced student, it's a wonderful thing just to have them play the etude and play all the rhythms, right hand and left hand. That's called lock hands, but that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. It's a technique that Bill Evans and Red Garland, Earl Garner, really worked on. Don't overplay accents. We just heard this. Don't overplay accents. In 6 and 7, they will overwhelm measure 6 and 7, they will overwhelm the phrase. If you don't have the etude in front of you, this doesn't mean a lot. There's some 16th note in triplets right after each other. Make sure that those 16th notes are half the length of the triplets. So you really get that differentiation. There's one particular tricky. Cross the second finger over and land on the thumb at the end of that second descending line. You should loop the last 4 bars to get the rhythm that I talked about being a quote of I'll be seeing you, because it's a bit of an obscure and strange rhythm to play. So if you loop it, I didn't sight read it correctly, so that's a signpost to me that you might want to loop that starting at the end of 4. Okay. On this etude, there are some wide linear passages, but I think it's always important at this level to say that on this etude in particular, there are no particular challenges for all your students that have smaller hands. In general, also, be sure that you don't let the do-ba-do-ba-do-ba-do-ba-do overwhelm, right? Like our last clinician said, you can really lighten up on that and play it much straighter and let the articulation and the contour of the phrases, bobbing the top and playing the general dynamics that come out of it, work, and that will take care of it. In fact, the great Ed Soph, who just retired from the University of Texas, said the easiest way to think, even though there's not a dynamic marking on this, the accents are the dynamic, and anything that's not accents are below that. So you don't get that harsh, just right? That's the normal level of conversation, is the accent. Everything else leads to destination, which is the normal level. Great. I saw him say that in a clinic once, and I will never forget it. Moving on to Etude 2. This is a great little realization of what you might recognize as another tune, which is the beautiful ballad Old Folks. And I'm really partial to several versions of this. Keith Jarrett is a gorgeous one that might go over some people's heads. If you want to listen to great ballad performers of the piano, listen to Hank Jones, listen to Oscar Peterson, listen to Bill Evans. Again, isolate the student on one beautiful, nice, slow ballad with some nice harmonization, and let them digest that a lot, rather than Spotify ballad. That's good, but you need that isolation and repetition, right? That's why hit music is popular today, because we're exposed to it everywhere, right? Expose them to the best stuff ever. That's what we're trying to do here, right? All right, speaking of the best stuff ever, this is my rendition of Piano Etude 2 by Dan Kavanaugh, with whom I share a birthday, actually. The one thing I'll say before I play this is students who play well and read well will normally take this and not be subtle. And it's a ballad. So the one thing that I would get them to think about in order to get them to play this in the paradigm where they need to, is to get them to think about, what if you could play a wide dynamic range, but it was all shades of quiet? Gotta turn this down. Parse the theory of this with your student, especially if they're willing to go through the theory. Figure out what those notes and the chords are. Take that information, move it on. Across the cycle, if you want them to play big band music well that's realized only in chord symbols, you need great examples of those chords and harmonies to put in their ears and their hearts. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're here for, right? We want people to play beautiful music that they're coming up with themselves. And so exposing them to it, it goes beyond any of this competition, right? So if you find beauty in these etudes and can get them to explore it, that's how we're winning anyway, right? And, you know, obviously the kids that are figuring that out and playing great tapes for us are getting there. But hopefully we can inspire more of them. And maybe we can inspire a beginner to become not a beginner, or an intermediate to become not an intermediate, and for us to go beyond those categories with each of those students. That's what I try to do with each of them. And I've had some students that have become professional pianists, and that's one of the joys of my life. And I have some pianists that have moved on to love it, and I teach people of all ages, and if they love music more, then I've done my job. So just a couple thoughts about this etude. There's obviously some crunchy notes, some accidentals, some chromaticism. You're going to have to be meticulous about it. Bar 4, that's all chromatic. Those motions are all chromatic. Okay.